The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by intelligent beings. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed inside it. Floating platforms carried delegates from 47 different species, each one representing billions of lives across thousands of worlds. The walls themselves were alive with soft light that changed color based on who was speaking. On this day, the light was pale blue. It meant the Valori were in control of the session. Ambassador Elena Vance sat in the human delegation's small platform near the back of the chamber. Her team of 6 diplomats sat behind her, their faces calm, but their eyes tired. They had been here for 3 months. 3 months of meetings. 3 months of proposals. 3 months of hope slowly dying. Elena was 53 years old. She had spent 30 years in diplomatic service, starting as a translator and working her way up to become humanity's voice among the stars. She had believed in this mission. She had truly believed that the galaxy was ready to accept humans as equals. She had been wrong. High Arbiter Thiessen floated at the center of the chamber. He was Valori, a species made of living crystal. His body caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. When he spoke, his voice was like wind chimes in a storm. Beautiful, but cold. "We have considered humanity's application for full membership in the Interstellar Compact," he announced. His words were translated instantly into every language present. "After careful review, we are prepared to offer terms." Lena straightened in her seat. Around her, the chamber grew quiet. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Thiessen raised one crystalline arm. A holographic display appeared, showing the official document. "First, humanity will transfer all jump gate technology to compact control. This includes construction methods, maintenance protocols, and navigation systems." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Elena felt her stomach tighten. The jump gates were humanity's greatest achievement. They had built them over 2 centuries, creating a network that connected distant stars in seconds rather than years. No other species had managed to match their speed or reliability. "Second," Thiessen continued, "humanity will accept supervised development status for a period of 500 standard cycles. During this time, a compact oversight committee will guide human expansion and ensure compliance with established protocols." 500 cycles. That was roughly 600 Earth years. Elena did the math automatically. 20 generations of humans, living under alien supervision, being told where they could go, what they could build, how they could grow. Third, humanity will relocate populations from the Kepler 442 system, the Tau Ceti system, and the Proxima Centauri system. These regions have been designated for Cathari expansion under existing territorial agreements. Now the chamber buzzed with reaction. 3 colony systems. Millions of people. Homes that humans had built from nothing over a century of hard work, just handed over to the insectoid Cathari, who already controlled more territory than any other species in the compact. In exchange for these terms, Thiessen said, "Humanity will receive provisional observer status in the compact. You may attend sessions and submit proposals, though voting rights will be suspended until the supervisory period ends." He lowered his arm. The holographic document floated toward Elena's platform, waiting for her acceptance. "These terms are generous," Thiessen added. "No species has been offered membership so quickly after first contact. You should be grateful." Elena stared at the document. Around her, she could feel the eyes of the chamber, the Minari delegates with their 4 gleaming eyes, the massive Druin observer in his special gravity field, the clicking Cathari, already celebrating their new territories. Everyone waiting to see what the humans would do, she thought about Earth, about the children learning in schools that humanity had finally joined the galactic community, about the colonists on Proxima Centauri who had named their first city New Hope, about the scientists and engineers who had given their lives to build the Jump Gate network, believing they were creating something for all of humanity. And she thought about the 3 months of negotiations, the subtle insults, the dismissive laughter when humans suggested equality, the way Thiessen had looked at her delegation like they were clever animals who had learned to speak Elena stood up. The chamber fell silent again. She reached out and touched the holographic document. With one simple gesture, she deleted it. The light scattered and faded to nothing. Earth formally withdraws from all negotiations, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. Effective immediately, we are closing our borders to compact traffic. All existing agreements under the Soul Accords are terminated. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The translator systems hummed in the silence, waiting for words that didn't come. Then the Cathari ambassador made a sound like breaking glass. He was laughing. This is a joke, he said. A negotiating tactic. Very clever, human. Now sit down and accept the terms. Alina didn't sit. This is not a negotiation. This is a withdrawal. Humanity will chart its own course among the stars. We do not need your permission, and we certainly do not need your supervision. Oh, others were laughing. The Minari trade minister shook his bulbous head in amusement. Several smaller delegations whispered to each other, clearly entertained by the drama. High Arbiter Thiessen floated closer to the human platform. His crystalline body hummed with irritation. You cannot survive alone, he declared. No species has ever refused compact membership and prospered. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. You need our protection, our trade networks, our knowledge. Elena looked at him without fear. For 200 years, humanity has shared its technology freely with this compact. We built jump gates for species that couldn't build their own. We developed medical treatments for diseases that didn't even affect humans. We opened our universities to students from every world that asked. And in return, you offer us a leash and call it generosity. You overestimate your importance, Thiessen replied coldly. The compact functioned perfectly well before humans arrived. It will continue perfectly well after you retreat to your little corner of space. Lena smiled. It was not a happy smile. Suppose we'll find out, she said. But I want you to remember something. High Arbiter. We didn't ask you for anything. We offered partnership, friendship. You chose to demand submission instead. She turned to her delegation. We're leaving. The 6 humans rose and followed their ambassador toward the exit. Every eye in the chamber watched them go. Only the ancient Druid observer seemed troubled. His bioluminescent markings flickered with patterns that his species used to express worry. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall, and something about the way the humans walked out with such quiet dignity made him deeply uneasy. That night, the Galactic Council held a celebration. Delegates toasted each other and laughed about human arrogance. The Cathari ambassador bragged about the new territories his people would claim. Thiessen gave a speech about maintaining order in the galaxy. Nobody noticed the Druid. Observer leaving early, nobody wondered why. Humanity had seemed so calm in defeat, and nobody thought to ask what would happen when the jump gates stopped working. They would find out soon enough. Trade Minister Velen of the Minari Consortium prided himself on being the calmest person in any room. His species had 4 eyes, and he liked to say that this allowed them to see problems from every angle. In his 40 years of managing interstellar trade, he had handled pirates, plagues, and political upheaval without ever raising his voice. But today, standing in the communication center of his flagship, he was screaming, "What do you mean the gates are offline?" The young officer on the screen flinched. "Sir, all human-built jump gates in the Soul Border region have stopped functioning. Our cargo fleet is stranded. 17 ships carrying pharmaceutical compounds to the outer systems. They cannot proceed." Velen felt his 4 eyes blinking rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. That's impossible. Jump gates don't just turn off. They're powered by quantum cores. They run forever. The gates are still physically present, sir. But the navigation systems have locked us out. Every ship that approaches receives the same message. "At!" The officer hesitated. "Would you like to hear it?" "Yes." A new voice filled the communication center. It was pleasant, almost friendly. A human voice. "Thank you for using the Soul Dynamics Jump Gate Network. Due to the termination of the Soul Accords, this gate is currently restricted to authorized human vessels only. We apologize for any inconvenience. For information about alternative routes, please consult your local compact navigation authority. Have a wonderful day. Velen stared at the speaker in disbelief. They can't do this. Sir, our legal team has reviewed the original construction agreements. There's a clause. Section 47, paragraph 12. It states that in the event of diplomatic severance, Sol Dynamics reserves the right to recall or restrict all proprietary technology. Nobody reads Section 47. The humans apparently did, sir. Balan slumped into his command chair. Around him, his staff worked frantically at their stations, trying to find solutions that didn't exist. The Minari Consortium moved 60% of all medical supplies in the compact. Without the human gates, delivery times would increase from days to months. Some patients would not survive the wait, and the pharmaceuticals were just the beginning. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in the following days. The Valori Crystal Song Network, which allowed instant communication between their worlds, began experiencing failures. Engineers traced the problem to the relay amplifiers. Human-designed, human-built. Now, slowly degrading, without access to maintenance protocols that only humans possessed the Kethari agricultural domes on. 7 colony worlds started losing atmospheric stability. The processors that kept the air breathable had been purchased through third-party traders decades ago. Nobody had bothered to check where they came from. The answer, it turned out, was Earth. The Compact's own jumpgate network still functioned, but it was older and slower. Ships that once crossed the galaxy in hours now faced journeys of weeks. Fuel costs increased. Schedules collapsed. The carefully balanced economy of 47 species began to crack. High Arbiter, Thiessen called emergency sessions every day. But there was little the Council could do. They had no leverage. Humanity had retreated behind its borders and simply stopped responding to messages. This is economic terrorism, Thiessen declared to the assembled delegates. The humans are deliberately destabilizing our civilization. The Druid observer, who rarely spoke at council sessions, raised his ancient voice. Terrorism implies aggression. The humans have attacked no one. They have simply stopped sharing. The result is the same. Is it? The Druid's bioluminescent markings pulsed thoughtfully. When you demand a gift and it is refused, that is not theft. It is simply the end of generosity. The Ascent's crystalline body hummed with anger. Whose side are you on? I am on the side of truth, High Arbiter. And the truth is that we have taken humanity's contributions for granted. We assumed they would always be there. We were wrong. But the economic damage was only part of the crisis. On the Minari homeworld, restaurants that served Earth fusion cuisine faced riots when they ran out of imported ingredients. The spices, the techniques, the flavors that had made human food so popular across the galaxy were suddenly unavailable. Citizens who had grown up enjoying human cooking felt genuine grief. The entertainment networks suffered even more. Human dramas, comedies, and music had become essential to billions of viewers across dozens of species. Something about human storytelling resonated deeply with other intelligences. Perhaps it was the emotional complexity. Perhaps it was the strange optimism that humans brought to even their darkest tales. Whatever the reason, when the streaming services went dark, the impact was immediate. Viewership of compact-produced entertainment dropped by 40%. Citizens complained that their own species' stories felt empty by comparison. Psychologists reported an increase in depression-related cases, particularly among young people who had grown up consuming human media. It's just entertainment, the Cathari ambassador said dismissively at one council meeting. Our people will adjust. But 3 weeks later, he received reports of civil unrest in his own territories. Workers were refusing to meet productivity quotas. Students were skipping educational sessions. When questioned, they gave the same answer. What was the point of working hard in a galaxy that had suddenly become so gray and quiet? The Seoul Medical Institute had been the most generous of all human institutions. For a century, they had developed treatments for diseases that didn't even affect humans. They had shared their research freely, asking only for basic recognition. 17 breakthrough therapies originated from their laboratories, treating conditions and species across the compact. Now the Institute announced it was prioritizing domestic research. Medical supplies began running low. Patients who depended on human-developed treatments faced uncertainty. Hospitals sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for help. The responses were polite but firm. We regret that we are unable to assist at this time. We wish you the best in developing alternative solutions. 6 weeks after the withdrawal, High Arbiter Thiessen stood alone in his private chambers, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. The compact territories were marked in gold. Human space was marked in silver, and everywhere red warning indicators showed systems in crisis. His door chimed. He waved it open. The Druin observer entered slowly, his massive form barely fitting through the doorway. He was the oldest living being in the compact, and he moved with the careful patience of someone who had learned that rushing accomplished nothing. You should have listened, the Druin said simply. Thiessen didn't turn around. Listened to what? To what the humans were actually offering? Not technology, not trade. Friendship, partnership, the chance to build something together. The Druin settled into a specially designed chair, but you only saw a young species that could be controlled. You thought their generosity was weakness, wasn't it? No. The Druin's markings flickered with something like sadness. It was hope. They hoped we would see them as equals. They hoped we would appreciate what they gave freely. They hoped the galaxy could be better than it had been. And now they have stopped hoping, and we are beginning to understand what we have lost. Thiessen finally turned. His crystalline face showed no expression, but his voice was tired. What do we do? We remember something important about humans, the Druin replied. Something we forgot in our arrogance. They were never afraid of us. They didn't share because they were weak. They shared because they wanted to. The ancient being rose slowly. Now they don't want to anymore, and all our power, all our history, all our pride cannot force them to change their minds. He moved toward the door. The only question remaining is whether we can convince them to hope again. And that, High Arbiter, will require something you have never given them. What? Respect. The door closed behind him, leaving Thiessen alone with his maps and his regrets. Ambassador Reth of the Cathari Dominion stood in the great agricultural dome of Colony 7. Watching his people's food supply die, the dome stretched 4 kilometers in every direction. Beneath its transparent ceiling, vast fields of grain-like plants had once swayed in artificially generated breezes. These crops fed 3 billion Catharia across a dozen worlds. They were the foundation of the Dominion's power. Now the plants were turning brown. The atmospheric processors that maintained perfect growing conditions had begun to fail, one by one. Without them, the air inside the dome was becoming toxic. How long do we have? Reth asked. His chief agricultural scientist, a female named Kethel, clicked her mandibles nervously. 2 weeks, perhaps 3. After that, the crop will be completely lost. We will face our first food shortage in 400 years. And the processors cannot be repaired. We have tried, Ambassador, but the internal components use a crystalline matrix that we cannot replicate. The original manufacturers sealed the technology. Reth's compound eyes focused on the nearest processor unit. It was a gray cylinder, about as tall as a Cathari, humming softly as it struggled to function. For 200 years, these machines had worked perfectly. Nobody had ever questioned where they came from. Who made these? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Kethel hesitated. The purchase records showed they were acquired through the Minari trading networks. But we traced the supply chain. The original source was ... double quotes. She stopped. Say it. Sol Dynamics Atmospheric Systems. The same company that built the jump gates. Reth closed his eyes. In his long political career, he had learned to accept unpleasant truths. But this truth was almost too large to process. The Cathari Dominion, the mightiest military power in the compact, had built its entire agricultural system on human technology, and now that technology was failing. Similar revelations were spreading across. the galaxy like a disease. Every day brought new discoveries, new embarrassments, new crises. On the Valori homeworld, the famous Crystal Communication Network experienced a catastrophic failure. For 10,000 years, the Valori had used resonance patterns in their crystalline bodies to communicate across vast distances. But in the last century, they had enhanced this natural ability with artificial amplifiers, human-designed. Amplifiers. The devices had been a gift from Earth's first diplomatic mission. So long ago that most Valori had forgotten the origin. They had simply incorporated the technology into their way of life, never questioning its source. Now, without maintenance, the amplifiers were degrading. The Valori could still communicate naturally, but only over short distances. Their empire of instant connection was fracturing into isolated worlds. The Minari Trade Consortium conducted a full audit of their technology. The results were devastating. 63% of their medical scanners used human sensor arrays. 41% of their navigation systems relied on human star mapping data. Even their famous banking network, the most sophisticated financial system in the galaxy, ran on quantum encryption protocols developed at Earth's Cambridge University. How did this happen? The Minari Prime Minister demanded at an emergency cabinet meeting. How did we become so dependent without realizing it? The answer, when historians pieced it together, was simple. Humans had been generous. Relentlessly, consistently, almost absurdly generous. For 200 years, they had offered their innovations freely, asking only for friendship in return. Other species had accepted these gifts without thinking. Why would they refuse free technology that worked better than their own? Why would they invest resources in developing alternatives when humans were happy to share? It had never occurred to anyone that the sharing might stop in the council chamber. Delegates gathered to hear a report from the compact historical archive. An elderly Druid scholar named Orenthal had spent 2 weeks researching humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. His findings changed everything. Humans arrived in our region of space 207 years ago. Orenthal began, his bioluminescent markings projecting images as he spoke. At that time, they possessed technology roughly equivalent to our own. They were not more advanced. They were not less advanced. They were simply different. The images showed early human spacecraft, bulky and inelegant by current standards. But humans had one quality that set them apart. They innovated constantly. While other species refined existing technology over centuries, humans rebuilt everything every few decades. They were never satisfied with good enough. They always asked, how can this be better? New images appeared, jump gates, medical devices, entertainment systems, agricultural processors, communication arrays. Over 2 centuries, human innovations spread throughout the compact. Sometimes they were sold. More often, they were given away. Humans seemed genuinely pleased when other species benefited from their work. Orenthal paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the chamber. We received these gifts gladly, but we never asked ourselves an important question. Why were they being so generous? What did they hope to gain? Resources, the Cathari ambassador suggested. Access to our territories? No, humans never asked for territorial concessions in exchange for technology. They never demanded exclusive trade rights. They never required military alliances. Orenthal's markings flickered with emphasis. They asked for only one thing, consistently, for 200 years. What? Membership. Full, equal membership in the Interstellar Compact. The right to sit among us as partners rather than petitioners. Silence filled the chamber. We refused, Orenthal continued. Year after year, we refused. We accepted their gifts and rejected their requests. We praised their technology and dismissed their culture. We used their innovations to build our economies while treating them as clever children who had not yet earned adult responsibilities. High Arbiter Thiessen shifted uncomfortably. This is ancient history. We need solutions, not lectures. History is the only solution, Orenthal replied calmly. Because until we understand what we did wrong, we cannot understand how to make it right. He turned to address the full chamber. Humans do not hate us. They are not seeking revenge. They have simply realized something that took them 200 years to accept. We will never see them as equals. No matter how much they give, no matter how much they share, we will always view them as outsiders. Lesser beings. Useful, perhaps. Clever, certainly, but never truly one of us. That's not true, someone protested weakly, is it not? When Ambassador Vance stood in this very chamber 3 months ago, how many of us listened to her with genuine respect? How many of us saw a fellow sentient being deserving of dignity and partnership? Or did we see a representative of a young species that needed to learn its place? Nobody answered. Humans withdrew because they finally understood the truth, Orenthal concluded. They could give us everything they had, and it would never be enough. So they stopped giving. Not from anger. Not from cruelty. From exhaustion. They were tired of hoping for something we would never offer. He gathered his notes and prepared to leave. If you want them back, you will need to convince them that things have changed. That we have changed. And speaking honestly, after reviewing 2 centuries of history, I do not know if that is possible. The chamber remained silent long after he departed. Outside, in the corridors of power, the real conversations began. Junior diplomats whispered to each other. Scientists compared notes. Merchants calculated losses. And slowly, very slowly, a new understanding emerged. The humans had never wanted to conquer the galaxy. They had wanted to improve it. They had dreamed of a future where different species worked together, where generosity was rewarded with friendship, where being kind was not the same as being weak, and the galaxy had crushed that dream. Now everyone had to live with the consequences. The ship that crossed into human space carried no weapons. It bore no flags or symbols of the Interstellar Compact. It was simply a transport vessel, old and somewhat shabby. It's a kind of ship that traders used for routine cargo runs. Inside were 47 beings from 12 different species. They were not diplomats or politicians. They were ordinary citizens, teachers, scientists, merchants, artists, people, whose lives had been disrupted by humanity's withdrawal, and who wanted to understand why. Hi, Arbiter. Thiessen had refused to send an official delegation. We do not beg, he had declared. But the Compact's governing rules allowed private citizens to travel freely. And these 47 had decided to try something that no government would attempt. They would simply ask. The ship was intercepted 3 hours after crossing the border. 2 human patrol vessels appeared alongside, sleek and efficient, their weapons ports closed, but clearly visible. Attention, unidentified vessel. You have entered restricted human space. State your purpose. The ship's captain, a Minari merchant named Vela, took a deep breath. We are private citizens from the Interstellar Compact. We carry no weapons and no official authority. We wish only to speak with someone, anyone we want to understand. A long pause followed. Then the human voice returned, slightly softer. Proceed to the following coordinates. You will be escorted to a border station. Do not deviate from the indicated course. The journey took 6 hours. The Compact citizens spent the time in nervous silence, watching through viewports as human space unfolded around them. They saw stations and colonies, ships coming and going, the everyday activity of a civilization that seemed completely indifferent to the crisis it had caused. The border station was a rotating cylinder, orbiting a small red star. It looked functional rather than impressive. As the ship docked, the visitors noticed something unexpected. The docking bay was decorated with colorful banners. Music played softly over the speakers. A group of human children stood in formation near the entrance, holding flowers. What is this? A Cathari scientist named Rethal whispered. The airlock opened. A human woman stepped forward, smiling warmly. She wore simple civilian clothes and carried no visible authority. Welcome to Seoul Border Station 7, she said. My name is Maria Chen. I'm the community coordinator here. We've been expecting you. Expecting us? Vela asked, confused. We've been monitoring Compact communications for weeks. We knew someone would eventually come. We just weren't sure who. Maria gestured toward the children. The local school wanted to greet you properly. They've been practicing." The children stepped forward and began to sing. It was a simple song, something about friendship and stars and new beginnings. Their voices were imperfect but earnest. Several of the compact visitors felt unexpected emotions stirring. When the song ended, Maria led them into the station. They were given comfortable quarters, offered food prepared with their various dietary requirements in mind, and provided with entertainment options from human cultural archives. But nobody told them why they were there. Nobody asked what they wanted. Nobody negotiated. Days passed. The visitors explored the station, watched human families going about their lives, attended local events and celebrations. They were treated with consistent, genuine kindness, not the formal courtesy of diplomatic protocols, something more personal. After 2 weeks, a young human man requested a meeting with the delegation. His name was Marcus Chen, Maria's nephew, and he worked as an attaché for the SOL, Government's Border Affairs Office. The 47 visitors gathered in a conference room. Marcus entered alone, carrying nothing but a cup of tea. "You're confused," he said, settling into a chair. "You expected rejection or immediate negotiation. You thought we would either turn you away or try to extract concessions. Instead, we've just been nice to you for 2 weeks." Vela nodded slowly. "We don't understand. What do you want from us?" "Nothing. Nothing. We brought you here so you could see us. Not politicians. Not diplomats. Just people. Living our lives, raising our children, building things and fixing things and making music and falling in love." Marcus sipped his tea. For 200 years, the Compact saw humans as a resource. Useful technology, entertaining media, convenient solutions to problems. You never saw us as people. A Valor delegate, her crystalline form chiming softly, leaned forward. "But the technology was important. The media was important. Those things matter. They do. But they're not the point." Marcus set down his cup. "My grandmother was part of the first diplomatic mission to the Valori homeworld. She talked about it her whole life. Do you know what impressed her most? Not your crystal cities. Not your ancient history. Your children. She watched Valori children playing in a garden, and she thought, they're just like us. They laugh. They cry. They hope for the future. And she spent the rest of her career trying to build bridges between our peoples." He paused. "She died last year. Still hoping? Still believing that one day someone on the council would look at humanity and see what she saw in that garden. Not resources. Not threats. Just people." Silence filled the room. "We withdrew because we were tired," Marcus continued. "Not angry. Tired. 200 years of giving everything we had, and never once being seen as equals. Never once being invited to sit at the table as partners. Always children. Always students. Always supervised." A Cathari scientist spoke up, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The council offered membership. They offered terms. They offered a leash. A 500-year probation. Supervision of our development. Surrender of our technology. Relocation of our people." Marcus shook his head. "Those aren't terms of membership. Those are terms of surrender. And we have nothing to surrender for. We did nothing wrong. So what happens now?" Vela asked. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. "Now you go home. You tell your people what you saw here. The singing children. The comfortable quarters. The genuine welcome. You tell them that humans don't hate the Compact. We never did. And the council? The council can send its own message when they're ready. But it has to be real. Not another set of demands dressed up as diplomacy. Not another attempt to control us while pretending to accept us." He stood. "We're not asking for much. Just honesty. Just respect. Just the basic dignity of being seen as what we are." The Valerie delegate asked quietly. Marcus smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. Hopeful. Despite everything, we're still hopeful. We still believe the galaxy can be better than it is. We still want to build something beautiful together, but we're done building alone. We're done giving without receiving. We're done hoping without reason. He moved toward the door. Go home. Tell them what you saw. And then if anyone wants to come back, not as representatives of the compact, but as individuals who believe what we believe, they'll be welcome. And if the council refuses to change, Marcus paused at the doorway. Then the galaxy will be a lonelier place. For everyone. He looked back one last time. We don't want that. We never wanted that. But we won't accept being treated as less than what we are. Not anymore. Not ever again. He left. The 47 visitors sat in silence for a long time. Then, slowly, they began to talk, to share what they had seen and felt, to process the strange experience of being treated with kindness by people they had never valued. When they finally departed, 3 weeks after arriving, something had changed in them. They couldn't quite name it, but they knew with absolute certainty they could not go back to seeing humans as they had before. And they knew they were not alone, across the galaxy. In small conversations and private moments, others were reaching the same conclusion. The withdrawal had not been an attack. It had been a mirror. And what the compact saw reflected in it was not flattering. Change was coming. The only question was whether it would come fast enough. 1 year after the withdrawal, the galaxy was a different place. The interstellar compact still existed, but its authority had crumbled. 7 species had formally withdrawn from the organization, citing fundamental disagreements about values and governance. Dozens more had quietly opened independent communication channels with Earth, bypassing the Council entirely. The Cathari Dominion, once the most aggressive advocate for human submission, had experienced a political revolution. Ambassador Reth had been removed from his position after admitting publicly that his species had been wrong. The new Cathari leadership had implemented something unprecedented in their history. They apologized, not to the Council. To humanity directly, the Minari Trade Consortium had rebuilt its networks around human-compatible systems. They had swallowed their pride and asked Soul Dynamics for help. The humans had agreed, but only under new terms. Genuine partnership, shared development, mutual benefit. The Minari, to their surprise, found these arrangements far more profitable than the old exploitative model. Even the ancient Druin had emerged from their traditional neutrality. Their elder council had issued a statement, praising human wisdom and calling for a complete reform of galactic governance. Only the Valori remained stubborn. High Arbiter Thiessen had refused all calls for resignation, insisting that humanity's withdrawal was temporary and that the compact would eventually prevail. Then, on the anniversary of Ambassador Vance's departure from the council chamber, something remarkable happened. A small Valori ship appeared at the Sol border. It carried no weapons, no guards, no diplomatic credentials. Inside was a single passenger. Her name was Crystalline Mevin. She was the daughter of a minor Valori noble house, educated at the most prestigious academies on her homeworld. She had spent decades studying human culture, learning human languages, understanding human values. And when the crisis began, she had been one of the first Valori voices to call for genuine reform. For her trouble, she had been stripped of her titles and exiled from polite society. Now she had come to Earth alone, carrying nothing but a small crystal that contained recordings of her people's history, Ambassador Alina. Vance met her at the landing pad of Sol Station 1. The two women stood facing each other in the artificial sunlight, surrounded by curious onlookers and historical significance. "I am not here as a representative of the compact," Mevin said. Her crystalline form chimed softly in Earth's atmosphere, producing sounds that were almost musical. "I am not here to negotiate terms or demand concessions. I am here for one reason only." "What reason?" Vance asked. "To apologize. And to ask, not demand, whether humanity would consider teaching us." Vance studied her carefully. "Teaching you what?" "How to see other species the way you do. As potential friends rather than potential threats? As partners rather than subordinates." Mevin paused, her internal light flickering with emotion. "We have been the dominant power in this region of space for 12,000 years. In that time, we built great empires. We developed magnificent technologies. We believed ourselves to be the wisest and most advanced civilization in existence. She lowered her head slightly, a gesture of humility that no Valerie had ever made to an outsider. We were wrong. About many things, but especially about what wisdom means. Vance considered this for a long moment. Around them, the station continued its daily routine. Ships came and went. Families walked past on their way to recreation areas. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. "Do you know what the hardest part of the last year has been?" Vance finally asked. "Tell me." "Not the isolation. Not the economic adjustments. Not even watching the compact struggle." Vance's voice softened. "The hardest part was watching species we genuinely cared about suffer, and knowing we couldn't help them without betraying everything we had fought for." "You wanted to help?" "Of course we did. We never stopped caring about the galaxy. We never stopped hoping for the future we had dreamed of." Vance smiled sadly. "We just realized that hope alone wasn't enough. That generosity without respect would always be taken for granted. That kindness without boundaries would eventually destroy us." Mevin nodded slowly. "My people have a saying. The hardest crystal is formed under the greatest pressure. You were pressured for 2 centuries, and instead of breaking, you became stronger." "Not stronger," Vance corrected gently. "Clearer. We finally understood what we actually wanted, and we stopped accepting less." "And what do you want now?" Vance looked out at the stars visible through the station's observation windows. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were struggling with the consequences of the compact's mistakes. Millions were suffering. Some were dying. "The same thing we always wanted," she said. "Partnership. Friendship. A galaxy where different species work together because they choose to, not because they have to. Where generosity is met with gratitude, and kindness is returned with kindness." She turned back to Mevin. "We didn't want to rule anyone. We just wanted to make things a little brighter. And we were willing to share everything we had to make that happen. All we asked in return was to be seen. Really seen. As equals, and now. Vance extended her hand, a human gesture of greeting that Mevin had studied for years. "Now, we're ready to try again. But only with those who understand what we're really offering." Mevin reached out and took Vance's hand. The contact between crystalline fingers and human flesh produced a soft, chiming sound, like distant bells. "I understand," Mevin said. "And I want to help you teach others." The meeting that followed lasted for 3 days. It was not a negotiation. There were no treaties, no agreements, no official documents. It was simply a conversation. 2 intelligent beings, from vastly different backgrounds, discovering how much they had in common. When Mevin returned to Valori space, she carried with her something more valuable than any technology or trade agreement. She carried a new vision of what the galaxy could become. Within months, reform movements had sprung up on a dozen Valori worlds. Citizens demanded new leadership. Young people studied human languages and cultures. Artists created works celebrating the possibility of genuine friendship between species. High Arbiter Thiessen resigned quietly, disappearing into private life. His replacement was elected by popular vote, the first time such a thing had happened in Valori history. And the new High Arbiter was crystalline. Mevin, the document she presented to the Reformed Council 3 months later, was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It was not a treaty. It was not a membership agreement. It was a declaration of shared purpose. The declaration rejected all hierarchies. No species would be senior or junior. No civilization would be supervisor or supervised. Instead, every signatory committed to 3 simple principles: meet as equals, help as friends, and never mistake generosity for weakness. Earth was the first to sign, then the Minari, and the Druin, who had waited 3,000 years for someone to propose something so simple and so profound. One by one, species across the galaxy added their names. Not because they were forced, not because they feared the consequences of refusal, because they had finally understood what humanity had been offering all along. The old compact dissolved. In its place arose something new, something better. something that honored the best qualities of every species that participated. On the day the declaration was formally adopted, the ancient Druid observer who had witnessed the beginning of the crisis was asked for his thoughts. "Humans did something no species in recorded history has ever achieved," he said, his bioluminescent markings shining with colors that his people reserved for moments of joy. They conquered the galaxy without firing a single shot, without threatening anyone, without demanding submission. "How?" a young reporter asked. The Druid smiled, an expression that looked strange on his ancient features. "They made us realize how much lonelier we were without them. They showed us that strength and kindness could coexist, that generosity and self-respect were not opposites, that the universe was vast enough for every species to thrive, if only we could learn to share it properly." He looked up at the stars. "They gave us something more valuable than technology or resources or power. They gave us hope. And when we finally learned to deserve that hope, they welcomed us with open arms." The new era had begun, and for the first time in galactic history, it began not with conquest or fear, but with an open hand and a genuine smile. Somewhere in a small office on Earth, Ambassador Elena Vance received news of the final ratification. She read the message 3 times, then set it down and looked out her window at the night sky. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered to no one in particular. "We finally did it." Outside, the stars shone with light that had traveled millions of years to reach her eyes. For the first time in a very long time, they seemed to shine a little brighter.